have a lot of passion for what you're doing. This rings true because it's so hard that if you don't, any rational person would give up. It's really hard, and you have to do it over a sustained period of time. So if you don't love it, and if you're not having fun doing it, you're gonna give up.
So welcome to another episode of Jonsuntitledpod podcast, a partner of MoshPitNation.com. This week's guest is it's a fun one. It is Mr. Bjorn Strid. You may know him from a little band called Soilwork. Maybe you're familiar with him from Disharmonia Mundi, or maybe you've heard of his newer band, Night Flight Orchestra. And maybe you've heard my co-host be called a slew of different names, too many to list here. But if you're familiar with the name Daniel Terry, he is here. How are you doing?
I'm doing just fine. I think you outdid yourself with that one. But it is true. I have been called a lot of things. Some of them I can't even say on a podcast.
Some of them even to your face.
Absolutely. I don't know what my mom was thinking, but...
No, this was a fun one. I'm going to go ahead and kind of spill the beans because this was a very interesting way that this interview came about. For those who may not know, I'm a pretty big Turbo Negro fan, and if you are not familiar with that band, go do yourself a favor and go check out one of the best punk classic rock bands you probably have never heard of.
Yeah, don't get upset. Just go check it out. It's
really fucking good. If you like songs about pizza and rocking against ass, or ass cobras, or all these kind of things, or if you're familiar with the Wild Boys, the theme to the Wild Boys show was actually a Turbo Negro song.
Perfection.
And so the now old singer of Turbo Negro, Mr. Hank Von Hell, just released a solo song for his upcoming solo album. And so I had reached out to get to talk to someone that I've long admired. And in the process of trying to set that up, I was asked if I would like to talk to Bjorn about the Night Flight Orchestra.
Of course.
Now, initially, though, that wasn't explained to me. It was just, would you like to talk to Bjorn? And I was like, well, yes. Yes, I would.
The answer is always a resounding yes.
Always a resounding yes. And then somewhere in the email exchanges of trying to figure this out, because Bjorn lives in Sweden and there's a time difference and so on and so forth, the news that Soilwork have a new album that's done, it's being released, so on and so forth, but that is not what I was to talk to him about. Which was fine, because I actually like pretty much everything Bjorn does. I think he doesn't put out bad music. It's like he just innately cannot put out bad music. To me.
Right.
And so here he is to talk about the Night Flight Orchestra. Now, the interesting thing is, and Dan's heard this conversation, and sadly, again, he wasn't a part of the conversation, but we actually had a pretty interesting conversation about how much Soilwork and Night Flight Orchestra parallel each other and help influence each other in various ways. And I was not expecting that.
Yeah, most people, like you said, John, again, we're spilling so many beans about this conversation that I'm sure you all just can't wait to hear. Whenever he's like, it was kind of nice finishing up the Night Flight stuff and then restringing the guitar to play some Soilwork stuff. He's like, and that made me feel really good. And I had no problem shedding the one and putting on the other. And like you said, John, that's not very common.
No.
Because, sometimes whenever a band that you like puts out something that's very different than that, there's always this tinge of worry that, oh no,
Gina Marie,
they're gonna start incorporating all of this crap into the main band, because that sadly is what happens a lot of the time. They find they find something else. The grass was greener on the other side, whatever it may be. So it was really refreshing to hear that like, no, I like that I do this cool different thing, and I like that I do my main thing. and they both coincide really well together.
Yeah, it was pretty interesting. And then I think the other thing too that was kind of fun about this, and something, I've been a Soilwork fan since I know Stabbing the Drama was like the first record I bought when it first came out.
Yeah.
But I think before that someone had shown me Steel Bath Suicide and Figure Number 5, and I think those were like the two that there were some songs off of each one that I liked, but I wasn't big into that scene at the time because you weren't really getting a lot of that here in the States. And again, import CDs cost you an arm and a fucking leg. Even at Best Buy, like I remember getting like the Digipack versions or the European import versions, but it's like I can spend $10 on the CD or I can now spend $35 on the same CD.
Yeah, I pre-ordered the Chain Heart Machine for $40.
Yeah, point proven. That's like 4 other CDs I could check out that are here in the States.
Yeah, but I mean back then though, God, we're talking like
I think that came out in like what, 98?
99, I think. And like that was, and I didn't pre-order it in 99. It was probably like 2001 or something like that. I mean, we're talking like 17 years ago now, dude.
Yeah.
And CD, I mean, back then I didn't really even sweat picking up a CD for $16.95 or something like that. Like now a CD pretty much has to be $10.
Yeah. No, I mean, that's the thing is like I know for like I said, Turbo Negro being a big fan of mine, like I'm a big fan of theirs, and for a while, like they have so much material, but it's just not available here in the States, and it was expensive to start buying their music. Same with like him and getting into bands like the Rasmus and all that kind of stuff. It's like when you start getting into music that's not here, it became really fucking expensive to become a fan of these bands and support them. And basically, the long and short of why I'm bringing any of that up is just, I've been a fan of Speed and what he's done in Soilwork for so long, and to get to talk to him about something, a creative thing he's done, it was kind of intimidating because, I mean, it's like I've admired this dude's output of work for so long. There was some other shit in the conversation that I thought was pretty cool too, and I wasn't expecting it. And I didn't necessarily say this, but I was thinking it as we were having the conversation, which is, you remember that scene in Eurotrip when they go to that guy and basically he's like, oh, Miami Vice, #1 hit show. And it's like, had way been off the air for like 20 years.
Yeah.
And so when, Bjorn is like making the comment, he's like, we didn't have cable until like 1995. And like, that just blew my fucking mind. It's like, like we didn't have access to all this shit. And when we did, it was like older shows.
Right.
So
that's what was so funny about that whole conversation was that I grew up like hardcore Pentecostal, so we didn't have TV. So like half the shows that you guys were talking about, I didn't even hear about until like, geez, I don't even know. Like it was like after TV Land for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just, I don't know, it's really cool. And I think that's the thing that's been so fucking crazy to me about doing this podcast too. In regards to, we make the comment like the internet doesn't exist. The fact that I'm talking to somebody about who's older than me, about the experiences they had growing up, but because of the difference in where we live, how we grew up, and the distance between like when they got technology that kind of allowed them to start catching up to us and what we had, it's almost like that gap allowed us to almost be at an even starting point. And I was thinking about that and how that's kind of crazy and weird unto itself, like just how different our cultures are and how I don't know. I don't know if anything I'm saying right now makes sense, but I just really was thinking about how crazy it is. Like I'm talking to someone in another country, about all these things from 20, 30, actually almost 40 years ago. And it's just like, man, like, like that joke I made a couple episodes ago, like, man, what a fucking time to be alive.
Also interesting to me just to hear like from an international perspective, how much American television culture, especially in the 70s and 80s, really affected the rest of the world.
Yeah, that is interesting too. I mean, I feel like it's a pretty big, I feel like it's just like that time period was just so culturally significant, and I guess that's kind of where I was trying to go with it. Is like, I grew up and I was a young kid in the 80s. Like I was born in 84, so I mean, it's like I don't have a ton of reference for all these other things. And I guess technically some people would say I'm a 90s kid, but it's like I do. MTV was big in my house. Like, that's basically what was always on, other than shitty old procedurals.
Right.
And, you know, it's just so crazy to think about, like, all the music I was exposed to in that time period, and just how all over the place it went. And like I said, I think it's just crazy to be able to talk to someone else that, like, the only way this ever would have happened back in the day is, like, if you had an exchange student or a pen pal.
Yeah, you couldn't just have these conversations.
No, not immediately.
Especially not with, like, respected musicians, you know?
Yeah.
That's the biggest one.
Well, I don't know if we're respected for doing this intro. I feel like it was kind of all over the place. But you know what? I think it's a good precursor to the chat I had with Bjorn. So without further ado, we're going to get into my chat with Bjorn Strid, and we'll talk to you afterwards. Well, I'll get right into this so that we don't take up too much of your time, since I know it's a little bit later on a Sunday for you.
It's all good. It's all good.
All right. And,
Drinking.
well, I made a lovely cocktail consisting of some Bombay Sapphire, some gin, grapefruit juice, lime juice, bitters, and ginger beer.
Wow.
So
That sounds good.
it is a very delicious drink. And then I also have...
Write that down for me. That sounds really good, actually. It sort of looked like a midnight flyer. We have our own drink with the band.
Oh, okay. Well, it's funny. I almost, for pun's sake, was going to drink this Night Owl beer that it's like a pumpkin-y kind of fall beer. And I was like, that's too on the nose. I'm just not going to do that. Well, I guess I will ask you about that drink if you're fine with sharing that with everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, basically, that drink came together. There's this Danish brewery called Mikkeller. I don't know. They're becoming sort of big in America, too,
Okay.
I believe. I think they have their own bar in New York as well. And they've done beers for Mastodon.
Okay.
So what we wanted to do with Night Flight Orchestra, we just didn't want another, beer, because it doesn't really fit the band.
Right.
We needed a cocktail.
Well, that's why I'm drinking a cocktail, actually. I was like, it seems more apropos.
Yes, you're doing the right thing. But yeah, so basically we try together with Mikkeller, because they love the band, and they reached out, and then let's do a cocktail together. And there's basically rum, pineapple juice. Let me see here. There's gold dust in it.
Like a Goldschlager kind of gold flakes?
Yeah, no, it's more dusty. It's
Okay.
not really flakes.
Okay.
It's dusty. And what else is in there? God, I should know this by now. Basically, it's a very tropical drink. Let's just put it this way: the recipe is it's a secret.
Okay.
But it's a perfect holiday sort of kickoff drink, I guess. And they have it on draft.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, you don't come across cocktails on draft very often, I guess.
Well, I was going to say, that's kind of the new thing, because we're getting a lot of distilleries, and a lot of the distilleries working with the breweries like Founders and so forth around here. And so we're actually starting to, like this brand New Holland, they're starting to create craft cocktails in a can already. So you guys are sort of, if you guys are canning this, sort of at the forefront of this new movement in alcohol, I guess.
Yeah, and I'm really glad to hear that. And I mean, especially with those cans that are sort of like see-through. Have you seen?
I have not seen those, actually.
I love those. I mean, they're sort of popular in Asia, of course, but it's especially since we have the gold dust. It would
Right.
make have it in sort of like a see-through can. So
That'll be cool.
yeah, we're working on that, and Mikkeller is a great brewery, and we have it it's actually on draft on Copenhagen Airport.
Oh, wow.
Exclusively in the world, and that's where we had show as well as the first band ever to play at Copenhagen Airport.
Y'all are just on some like extra baller shit over there. Then I guess.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of crazy. It was sort of the grand opening of sort of like a new wing at the airport.
Okay.
And then like a Mikkeller bar open in one of those corners there, and they wanted us to play there because they like us. So that's what we did, and that's where our new drink or our new cocktail was sort of celebrated, and that was like the grand premiere, I guess, of it. So that was really cool.
Oh. Well, I guess by those who haven't figured out yet from that craft cocktail experience and a little bit of background on it, I get the pleasure this early evening talking to Mr. Bjorn Strid of Night Flight Orchestra. And I gotta say, I've been really enjoying the mindset that this listening to the albums has kind of put me in. Your most recent album, Sometimes the World Ain't Enough, just came out a little bit ago via Nuclear Blast Records, and they also are re-releasing your two other albums, Internal Affairs from 2012 and 2015's Skyline Whispers. So I kind of wanted to, and forgive the redundancy of this question that you've probably been asked a bunch, but I mean, to some people, this is a new band that came out of nowhere. But for some of us who have been following the many adventures that you take musically, this is something that obviously has been around for, 6-7 years. Probably there's a beginning story even before the first record. So what was the beginning of Night Flight Orchestra?
I think it all sort of came together when me and David, the guitarist, who's both playing in the Night Flight Orchestra and Soilwork, he was actually the session touring guitarist for Soilwork in 2007. We did North American tour. I can't remember who we toured with, but might have been the Throwdown tour.
Oh shit! Yeah, that's right. Yeah. I forgot about that tour.
But that's where we met. He joined the band as a session guitarist, and we did I think it was like 6 weeks long, and I didn't know him since before. And we bonded instantly over classic rock. And, I mean, to a point where we just we had our sort of drinking hour before the show in the back lounge, having song battles with, classic rock, and it was everything, not only the music, everything from that time. It was, the way they were composing songs and producing songs and the fashion, and whatnot. It was everything basically. And we really bonded over that to a point where the rest of the guys in the, we had such a great time. And by the end of the tour, we just, it was one of those drunken ideas that became a reality. We said we need to start a band sort of capturing sort of the late 70s and early 80s, because we also felt that it's missing out there,
Most
and nobody's doing that anymore. Like what's wrong with people? I was gonna say. And because I mean, obviously there's been a big like retro rock wave the latest 10 years, but most of the bands are more sort of Black Sabbath, Led Zeppelin-esque,
right?
And pretty often with like an occult theme. It's a little too, I don't know. I mean, our band is pretentious as well, but it's in a different way. I don't know.
So you're not going to have any Night Flight Orchestra dildos for sale here pretty soon?
No, I mean, oh yeah, I'm okay. Who knows? But yeah, I don't know. We just felt that there was something missing out there, and because I mean, David has introduced me to so many bands. I knew a lot before I met him, but he was sort of like he opened the gates, basically, and we bonded so much, and there was an instant sort of musical communication that really created a flow that I didn't even know was possible, and after that tour, we just, tried to find people that sort of had the know-how and sort of understood the vibe and the concept that we were going for. And we found the perfect people, I came we came home from that tour, and I was like, oh, I know this fantastic keyboard player, Richard Larson. You know, he would be the perfect like guy for this band. It's like, oh, I know this drummer, my childhood friend Jonas Schelsbeck, you know, that I played with before. Like he's like, you know, he's a fantastic drummer. He's like a Toto drummer. You know, he has that, you know, sort of groove to him, and he gets it, you know. So, and then we added Charlie D'Angelo, who we already knew was very much into that kind of stuff. You know, he's playing in Arch Enemy and has been doing so for so many years, right? And also with, you know, Merciful Fate back in the day. So and he has a great sense of humor, and so we were obviously looking for you know, personal chemistry as well, which is very important. It's not all about the music. It just needed to work, and then we all got together. I think it was in 2009, 2010 in the summer, and I mean, I've done some clean vocals with Soilwork before, but and somewhere in my mind I knew that I could sort of pull off classic rock, you know, and whatever that means. Classic rock, what is classic? It's such a, you know, there's so many bands that would be part of that sort of label, I guess. But we got together, and it was just magical. It was one of those moments that I will never forget. You know, it's the greatest kick of my musical career, you know, probably since we started, you know, putting the first Soilwork album together, for example. It was like, it was something that I really needed, and it's probably something that I longed for such a long time.
You know, it's kind of funny. You talk about the fact that you didn't need just good players, you know, that understood the concept. And to me, that was something that kind of, when listening to the music, seeing the visual representation that you're putting out for this band, is it definitely feels like it's a concept all the way through. And to me, how long did it take for that concept to kind of solidify?
I guess it was something that was growing, you know, sort of gradually, and I guess it's also because of, I think I needed to do like 20 years with Soilwork before I could even possibly approach something like this, you know, because you know, the old cliche, you live and you learn, and you learn by your mistakes, and not saying that, you know, we haven't done that many mistakes with Soilwork, at least not musically. You know, we've always done something really, really good with the band, but I, you know, being in the business and all that stuff, which is so boring. I hate that word, but it's like being on the road for so many years. It's like, you know what, I'm gonna learn from my mistakes, and I'm gonna do something. I wanted to create this band because it was something that I needed to do in order to actually enjoy Soilwork more, because it sort of feeds off each other, you know, and to build up a concept, you know, I think that's more important than ever. And it's something that we really enjoy. We have gimmicks, obviously, but you can really tell that this comes from the right place. You know, there's so much passion and love behind this band, but I want it to be a show.
Yes.
You know, and I also guess I got a great kick out of starting this band because there's really no limits to what you can do musically, and of course you can develop metal, you know, in so many ways. And I believe we've been a part of that, you know, developing the sound of metal, you know, and but still there was something that I wanted to do, and it became the Night Flight Orchestra, and now I feel like so much more balanced musically. And sorry for sort of making the reference between both bands.
It's funny you say that, because one of the comments I was going to make, and I didn't know where to stick this, so it was a random note, but it's, you know, to me, knowing that you've created a few Soilwork records and some really ambitious ones in the midst of these records, as well as, I mean, I know Disharmonia Mundi has kind of been somewhat defunct-ish, hasn't really been much working on, but I mean, technically that is something that you were doing as well at one point. So with that being said, it was like, okay, like you have something that's a little bit heavier and different than what you were doing in Soilwork. Then you go to the other end of the spectrum with Night Flight Orchestra having been something like more on the rock kind of poppier side. So I was going to say, with you being so well-rounded musically and having so many different creative outlets, is it nice to kind of hop from one to the other? You know, maybe if you're getting fatigued of being in something that's aggressive, like, well, now I want to go do something over here and kind of sing and have fun and explore these realms, and maybe even to the point of getting to where when you're doing something Night Flight Orchestra related, you might be like, you know, I had something I was working on over in Soilwork, and I was pounding my head against the wall, couldn't figure it out. I think this idea will work for this song we've been demoing for a little bit, but it doesn't work for Night Flight Orchestra. Let me go over here and kind of reapply this other thing. Like, I feel like having those extra creative outlets might inspire you for your maybe main creative outlet per se.
I don't know if it has happened yet that I've been, sitting, writing songs. Is oh, should this be Soilwork or should this be Night Flight Orchestra? I don't think that happened yet. It's very separate, even though the switch is so easy.
Okay.
Even bands are so far apart. It's both bands must be that close to heart, because I remember we just finished up the new album with Night Flight Orchestra. I think in the beginning of the year, and then we were going to enter the studio in April with Soilwork. So the switch was that's when I started, like, okay, Night Flight done. Okay, let's restring the guitar, tuning, thicker strings and all that stuff. And I got really shocked how easy the transition actually was.
That's not a normal sentiment from a lot of people who.
I'm really surprised by myself, and I think that's the beauty of life, to be able to surprise yourself, sort of actions and ambitions and influences and everything. It's like how you can just switch, and I'm not schizophrenic as far as I know, but it almost felt like it's like, okay, and I'll take the metal suit off and I'll put on the red beret, and or it's kind of I don't know, it is strange, but I mean it must be so close to heart, because then I started doing the Soilwork songs, and I realized that, like, those songs are some of the best songs I've ever written with Soilwork. That was right after I finished the vocals and the mix for the Night Flight Orchestra. So I think it does feed off each other, even though it's so different, and it's a little bit of a yin yang situation, I guess, to sound a little bit pretentious, but
no, not at all. I think that's sense. Yeah, no, definitely. The other thing that I kind of wondered too, with the obvious influences of kind of 80s, I get more of an 80s vibe of this than I do necessarily the 70s, but I also wasn't around in the 70s to really have any recollections of those things to compare. But, something I did wonder, with the look of the band and so forth and how you present it, it did make me wonder, are you or anyone in the band a fan of, like, 80s wrestling?
80s wrestling? Well, I mean, here's the thing. Like, in the 80s, we only had 2 channels in Sweden. And then we got cable TV in late 80s, sort of. But I don't think my parents got cable TV until, like, maybe 94.
Okay.
I do remember there was a wrestling show on, I think it was Friday nights or so. I don't know. It was obviously sort of like, it was not live TV,
right?
But it was the American wrestling that was on, and I thought it was really cool. And me and my friends were actually doing sort of like a pre-party before we headed downtown and watched some wrestling. But I don't know if I've been inspired by the looks of these sort of wrestling guys. I don't think so, but it as far as it was a crucial part of the 80s, and it's still such a big deal in America, and it makes sense, but at the same time it doesn't. But I don't know. I mean, our music would work at any wrestling event.
Oh, for sure.
So it's, but I don't know if it had that much of an impact. I guess that's my sort of relation to American wrestling.
It just sometimes like the way the presentation it just there's something about it that just kind of reminds me, and maybe it's because of shows like Glow on Netflix and so forth, where
Love that show, by the way. I absolutely love that show.
Yeah, it's a great show. And so like some of the aesthetics, like when you're doing your interviews, and they got like this kind of 80s, almost like a Vaseline smear kind of on the screen, so it has like this sheen on it. It just kind of reminded me of like watching, you know, maybe like and this is more of like a 70s wrestling group, but like the Fabulous Thunderbirds, and they're just kind of like sitting around and bullshitting and shit like that. So it was, to me, it just kind of had like a little bit of this like old wrestling thing, like getting into a character, sort of like cutting a promo, so to speak, and having fun with it, where you kind of blur the lines of like reality and, you know, this fictitious thing. So to me, that was like maybe an inspiration.
That's actually a good reference, you know. And then I guess I am sort of entering a role, you know, putting on that beret, or, you know, and the suit, and it's fun, you know, but it's also something that I'm super serious about. It's like this perfect balance, you know. And yeah, I mean, I guess our music is extremely dreamy and also sort of cinematic.
Definitely.
Right, as.
Well, kind of speaking to another 80s cliche, you know, something that I think is really great about the 80s time period for me when looking back, you know, the theme songs and just a lot of things associated with, you know, movies, TV shows, like, you know, most people could probably still sing this theme song to like Full House or all these kind of things. Yeah. And I mean, you could probably even go back further to other classic TV shows, you know, like All in the Family and so forth. But I kind of got this sense of like, you know, like classic TV themes kind of being, you know, another maybe inspiration, or I don't know if that makes any sense.
I mean, TV themes they've had a great impact on me, I think. I mean, growing up, I loved getting to actually stay up late with my dad on Tuesday nights watching Hill Street Blues. That was like a highlight of my week. And for those of you who have heard the intro, it's a very like simple. It's just a piano, but there's just something about that melody, and I think that definitely sparked something, you know, as far as having an impact on my sense for melody. I think that's where I really started to become interested in melodies, and then, you know, there was all these fancy shows coming out. It was Dallas, and it was Falcon Crest, and it was Dynasty.
Oh man,
I started loving those strings, you know, and then there was another show which sort of went under the radar, at least in Sweden, Greatest American Hero.
Oh shit, yeah, they're remaking it.
No way.
Yeah, well, I heard they're remaking it. I don't know if it's going to be one of those that sort of gets greenlit and then just never comes back. But I mean, I've listening to a different podcast where they talk about, you know, pop culture movie news and all that stuff, or TV news. They said that Great American Hero was being remade, so we'll see.
Well, I don't know if I should say let's hope or not. I mean, the original show wasn't that great, to be honest, but the intro it was what was it? Basically a teacher who suddenly could fly.
Yes, and his dog, I believe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right there. But it was a great soundtrack, and I mean, I can highly recommend. I mean, it has a little bit of that sort of Seals and Crofts vibe over it. Sort of that, I don't know, typical late 70s, early 80s American sort of West Coast feel to it.
Yeah.
It's brilliant. It was made by a guy named Joe Scarberry.
Okay.
And it's out there, the soundtrack for Greatest American Hero, and it's actually really good. And especially the theme song, the intro is fantastic. And then as I grew a little bit older, became a teenager, I actually started like collecting for soundtracks, especially for like TV shows and collections, and I started really loving like Kojak, Streets of San Francisco, Beretta.
Oh shit.
Colombo, like all these like intros.
Where's In the Heat of the Night? I feel like that should be on there.
Huh?
In the Heat of the Night?
I don't know that one. How do
Oh.
I know? Don't know that one.
Oh
Shame on
man.
me.
I mean, it's funny. Like my parents, raised me on a lot of those old TV shows, and especially once like TV Land came around, watching, Columbo, watching. I mean, it's not as old of a show as that, but like The Commish and like In the Heat of the Night and like all these shows that when I watch them now, it's like I realize like they're not. It's kind of weird. Like it's not that they're not good now, like through the prism of modern day technology and so forth, but it's almost like, especially like at least like with me, like you look at In the Heat of the Night, you look at Quincy MD and so forth. They basically were the prototypes for like our Law and Order SVUs and stuff like that. Like these shows that could, in theory, as long as people were watching, could just last as long as they wanted to. Because when you're kind of in these police procedural type things, like they can go anywhere because crime never stops.
No, that's true. Another favorite one is Midnight Caller.
Okay.
That was a great intro. I actually watched it a couple of days ago. Just the intro is just there's just something about it. I mean, that was also one of those shows that I started watching with my dad late nights, and then I loved Alf.
Oh shit, they're remaking that apparently.
I know. I do not know how I feel about that because it needs to be exactly the same.
Yeah.
The same puppet, I was gonna say, the outfit and the exact same voice. I mean,
I think the dude's still alive, so I mean that can be done.
Yeah, I guess.
It's almost like Harry and the Hendersons. Like when they tried redoing that, it just didn't work.
I mean, and then there's Airwolf, obviously. Knight Rider.
The A-Team.
A-Team. And I love Rockford Files as well.
That was kind of a under the radar show, I feel like.
Yeah.
At least from what it was explained to me. It's not like I watched it in real time.
Yeah. I think they all had a big impact on me. And then watching, I mean, this is not a TV show; it's an actual movie. Risky Business, Tom Cruise.
Oh yeah, great soundtrack.
Track by Tangerine Dream. That that did something to me, and I think that's something that you can find all these sort of ingredients in the Night Flight Orchestra as well. And it's there, as well as even Swedish 70s 80s music, which is sort of hard to explain.
Would ABBA kind of be in that or no?
Yes, I mean absolutely 100%.
Okay.
There's a lot of ABBA influences, especially sort of with the grooves and
yeah,
the bass lines and all that stuff. Because I've always been a big fan of when disco got really big in the end of the 70s, or I would say like 76, 77. Some of the rock got really infused by disco, especially with the bass and the drums.
Oh yeah.
And I love that. A lot of people hate it. I even like, when Kiss sounded disco. I
was just gonna say Kiss when they did it. Yeah.
Disco. It's good stuff. A lot of people hate it, but I also like everything Kiss. So, that period, with Unmasked and Dynasty was fantastic, I thought, but a lot of people wouldn't agree with me. But that's definitely had a big impact on the Night Flight Orchestra.
I feel like something that's kind of interesting in listening to the Night Flight Orchestra albums consecutively. It reminds me of there's like one person, and it's not necessarily in sound, but I couldn't put my finger on why I kept coming up with this band and this name. Maybe it's because they were so over every 80s soundtrack, but were never a big band unto themselves unless you actively sought them out. But John Cafferty and the Beaver Brown Band, I think, were a very great prototypical kind of 80s pop rock band where they incorporated, they had some kind of like, rock and guitar stuff. They had, keys and synths and so forth, really good, memorable, vocals and stuff. But they were really only a soundtrack band. They were for anybody who may not be aware of who they are, they were the band that made up Eddie and the Cruisers, if you ever saw that movie. They were the band that did Hearts on Fire from Rocky IV. So, I mean, they are a band that, like, especially when I mention Hearts on Fire to anyone, they're like, holy shit, I love that song. I didn't know who that was. It's like, yeah, this guy John Cafferty and the Beaver Brown Band, like, they basically only existed on soundtracks, really. And it's very weird to think about that, because to me, like, soundtracks are sort of a lost art form, I feel like, because they used to be a driving force in movies. Like, almost any of the iconic movies of the 80s, I mean, look at Top Gun, Danger Zone. Like, you can name a song for up until, I'd say, maybe, shit, I guess I could even go to the 2000s, because that's when metal was, like, big on soundtracks. But I feel like that's something that's kind of lost, and I feel like that's kind of a niche area, sort of, that you guys could actually really come right in and take over. It's like this thing where it's like, oh, we kind of can fit a lot of different vibes with our music. So, I mean, is that something that maybe an avenue you guys have looked at doing, is syncing your music to commercials or to movies or whatever? Like, is that an avenue you would really like to explore with this band?
I think so. I mean, I would love to sort of, even though we're really focused on releasing actual albums, but it would be really, really cool if we got, signed to do the soundtrack for a movie. That would be fantastic. I think it would turn out really, really good. And as you mentioned, I mean, there were so many artists as well. It was like Robert Tepper and Tommy Farragher and even Sly, Sylvester Stallone, his brother.
Oh, Frank Stallone, yeah.
Frank Stallone, yeah. He did stuff for the movie that came out after Saturday Night Fever, which was actually called Staying Alive.
Yeah.
It's like dance movies.
Yeah.
Like, actually, it's gonna sound really weird, but I would love to do a soundtrack to a dance movie. That would be. I thought that would have worked out really well, I think.
Well, here's a weird what if scenario. I mean, you mentioned Kiss and sort of the era that you were talking about. A Kiss, that's, I think, within a few years of when Kiss meets the Phantom of the Opera, which isn't like a cinematic masterpiece or anything like that, but
no, definitely
not. Is that something maybe that would appeal to, Night Flight Orchestra, being like, maybe you do like a Michael Jackson's Moonwalker, where you, as the band, are the focal point or the stars of a movie that showcases your music, but also in sort of a rock opera or whatever you want to call it kind of way. I feel like that's something that is maybe on the horizon for the band.
I mean, it would have been awesome. I mean, but then again, how much money would that cost?
Who knows?
If we're gonna do it, sort of, it all depends if we're gonna be really serious about it or not. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. You're planting way too many seeds in my in my brain right now. Like, just, yeah, that could have been cool. Who knows what's gonna happen? But yeah, we really should do that.
I mean, in this day and age where they say you can record, wasn't there a movie that was actually shot on like an iPhone? There's like several iPhones.
Sure, there is.
Yeah. I mean, you never know. Technology is a lot more easier to get. But I understand it's also a financial and a time-consuming undertaking to do those things.
Yeah.
Kind of wanted to shift a little bit more to like a live setting. I know you've done some shows, and I know you have a European getting ready to start November 11th. To me, I feel like the stage production for this is just, I feel like I can go all over the place with what I think there could be. So how fun is it in preparing for a production side of things for Night Flight Orchestra in a live setting?
Yeah, I mean, it's also a question of budget, but we do everything we can to bring a real rock show the way it was meant to be. We have backup singers. We have the airline Annas, the stewardesses doing the backups. They're also performing on the actual album, the latest one. So we're doing everything we can, with lights and everything to create, like, an evening with the Night Flight Orchestra rather than like a tour package coming through town, which I'm so used to in the metal world. Not saying that metal bands can't put on a great show. They absolutely can, you know. But it's something that it's just a different world, I feel, with this band as well. And like we talked about boundaries and like limits and before, so I think we're going to try to do everything we can to make it, you know, like as soon as that, you know, the crowd enters the door, you know, to the venue, it should be an evening with, and not just another show. So
Right.
we're doing everything we can, you know, and I know it's going to be so much fun. I'm very excited. So is the whole band. So it's looking really good. And I mean, we've done some really crazy warm-up shows. We did the Copenhagen airport show, and then we also had the release party at the actual ABBA museum, which was
shit.
fantastic.
Yeah, I was watching the one at, was it Rock Hall? I think is what I. It was some. It's on YouTube. It's like the full set you guys did somewhere very recently or in the last year.
That was last year. Yeah, that was our first show outside of Sweden.
Oh wow, looked like it was pretty well received.
Yeah, it was really nuts. I mean, we were playing domino, and I saw people wearing, you know, black metal patches dancing to domino. It and it's great, I think. Fun.
Kind of we'll wrap up a little bit, like I said, so I can let you get back to your evening. You know, obviously a lot of Soilwork fans are probably gonna come over and check this out. What is the one thing you hope that Soilwork fans take away from Night Flight Orchestra?
Well, I think that it is really the sense for melodies. Really, you know, you can probably connect it to bands melody wise, even though it's sort of Soilwork tends to be a bit more melancholic, you know, when it comes to melodies. But we also sort of have that in the Night Flight Orchestra, but it's more like ABBA-esque, you know. That's one thing that, you know, people know when you hear somebody mention ABBA. Oh, it's like Dancing Queen, and then there's this song "Know Me, Knowing You," whatever it is, you know. But there's so much more, like great albums, and there's songs that are so melancholic too. And I think that also had an impact both on Soilwork and the Night Flight Orchestra. So I think that ABBA actually connects in a weird way, you know. And I think Soilwork has gradually become more and more sort of dark, extreme, melancholic ever since we started Night Flight Orchestra. But that doesn't mean that, you know, melodies, they cross over. You know, it's like, you know, both me and David write. Well, on the new album, we wrote everything on the latest Soilwork album, and then we write most stuff on the Night Flight Orchestra as well, with some, you know, exceptions. You know, Sebastian has written a lot, and also Richard, and so there's going to be some kind of crossover somewhere, you know.
Right. And
I think you can hear. I think somebody made a comment. I saw that, you know, obviously on Live or Mouth, for the latest single, the first single from the upcoming album of Soilwork. It's like, oh, Bjorn is doing too much Night Flight stuff on this new Soilwork track, and it's like full on black metal almost. So it's kind of interesting how people, maybe it's because they know that I'm doing Night Flight Orchestra, or maybe there's actually something in there, you know. But that doesn't matter because it's two different expressions. You know?
Right. Yeah, I don't know. I tend to find sometimes that fans are a little harder to separate, not as able to compartmentalize someone, you know, like this is like, I know him from Soilwork, and I know this isn't Soilwork, but I put the Soilwork lens as I'm watching this, and it's like, well, I feel like that's disingenuous because you're not going to get the full experience that was intended to be had because you're looking at it through a completely different prism. So I don't know. It was something I was thinking of earlier. I was like, oh, I wonder how Soilwork fans are going to take this.
True. And I think, I mean, the key word, I think, for both bands, I mean, I think, you know, regardless if you're like a metal fan or not, I think you would be able to see through it if there wasn't any presence in the music. And I think that's the key word, presence. You know, if you listen to Soilwork, you know, every little note is made for the right reasons, and it's the same case with the Night Flight Orchestra, and it's about the presence. And you know, that's what you should be looking for in music. You know, it's so multi-layered and and it's all about the presence in the end. Because we have way too much music out there that has no presence. So that's what you should be looking for, and not just, oh, that sounds like Miami Vice, and slag it off. I'm not saying that everybody, I think they should appreciate Night Flight Orchestra, whether they're a pop fan or a metal fan or whatever, just a music fan. But but that's really the key to music. It's the presence in it. And I think both bands represent me in a very good way. It's like 50-50. It's like all of me in two bands. It really is. So I think if you give it a try, I think you will be able to find that presence, because that's what it's all about.
Have you given? Because I know on all the band's socials for Night Flight, it obviously says your name as the vocalist, but I've wondered, have you come up with a name for your character?
No, I wish, actually. I mean, there's a lot of things, like, because we didn't really knew what we had with this band from the beginning. I mean, we were great musicians, we had great songs, and then it really took off, and it was so much fun, right? And when I'm sitting here, 4 albums later, I'm sort of wishing maybe I should have had a different name, but why? It's like it's just me, It's I would gladly put my full name on both Soilwork and Night Flight Orchestra albums. It's because it's me. I have really nothing to hide, really.
And kind of speaking to that presence you were talking about, where can people find yourself and or Night Flight Orchestra or whatever else you would like to push?
Well, we have, for the Night Flight Orchestra, that would be our Facebook page. It's quite active, and also our Instagram, and Soilwork official Facebook as well, and also Instagram. So I guess that's where you will get the latest news.
And then lastly, I always like to end these episodes out with a song. So what would you like me to play it out to?
Ooh, that's a tough one. I assume from the latest album.
It could be anything, actually. So if you would like me to play Hill Street Blues theme, that's fine.
Sorry. No, but I mean, I guess it would make sense. We did play something from the latest Night Flight Orchestra album. So let's do the title track.
Okay.
Time Tomorrow in the Night.
Do you have any quick, maybe fun story about recording that song or writing it?
I mean, we didn't have the Airline Annas doing backups on the previous album, Amber Galactic. They came in, basically, they started touring with us for Amber Galactic, but they never been in the studio with us. And when we recorded this song, it gave that extra sort of melancholic ABBA flair to it in the chorus. You can definitely hear that when you listen to the song.
Yeah. Well, awesome. Well, thank you very much again, Bjorn, for taking the time. And again, Night Flight Orchestra on a European run starting November 11th and ends December 22nd. Hopefully some promoters will maybe make some offers to get you guys to come out this way, and maybe a Midwest show will happen so I can try to come out and see it.
Absolutely. Let's hope.
So that was my conversation with Mr. Bjorn Strid of the Night Flight Orchestra and Soilwork. Dan, again, sadly, you couldn't be there because you were doing the family thing with a whole bunch of sick family members.
It has not been fun.
No, it hasn't.
Yeah.
I felt like I was bragging. Like, you texted me about how, like, I had to change my shirt 6 times. I was like, is it hot there or something? And you're like, no, I've been thrown up on, like, 6 times. And I was like, I just talked to Bjorn.
Then I'm like, shut up. Yeah, not great. Not great. But that's okay. Your conversation was great, and that is the important part.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Weren't expecting me to say thank you?
No, no one ever says thank you. It's a thankless job.
Uh-huh.
Oh my God.
Manners, they're amusing.
What was interesting is just how you guys were able to kind of weave in and out of the Night Flight Orchestra stuff and actually tie it into what you guys really wanted to talk about, which was clearly the 80s sitcoms. And well, not really sitcoms. You guys talk mostly about like crime shows and stuff.
Yeah, it was really weird.
And just as a side note, I loved In the Heat of the Night.
Oh, such a great show.
Like, even still, like, because I travel sometimes, and whenever I'm in a hotel room or something, and I'm just flipping through TV channels. If In the Heat of the Night's on repeats, I'm totally good. I'm like, well, this is what I'm doing tonight.
Yeah, it basically was the precursor to how Law and Order SVU is. Because I remember, like, In the Heat of the Night used to be on like 7 different channels at any given time, and like all day, like it'd be on all day, and it's like, all right, so. I don't know. It's a great show. It has a great theme. I almost was going to fuck with him and not play the song he told me to and just play In the Heat of the Night theme.
You should have. That would have been really funny.
Yeah, no, that's the thing that I really enjoy sometimes about doing these, though. And it's just the spontaneous nature. And it's something like, it's always funny because, like, when I sent this to Dan goes, and I'm going to say this, and I know it's going to sound bad, and I don't mean it to sound that way, but something I've been trying to do more is not prepare as much. Not because I want to go in and don't do any due diligence. I think Dan can attest. I probably spend a lot more time preparing for something, bouncing questions off of him, so on and so forth, than probably a lot of other people may. But something that I've learned to start doing is just try to be more present and just have a conversation. And as you heard, this episode actually starts not from me actually starting the episode. It was I kept in the part where we just started talking about the drink I was having. Because to me,
right.
I realized, like I told Dan, I go, as soon as that happened, and that was within the first 34, probably minute and a half of me talking to him, because we were able to see each other, for those listening. But it was one of those things where as soon as that happened, I basically was like, I'm good. I already can tell this is going to be real easy. I'm just going to kind of like see what happens. And that's kind of how I went into it. Like, I had questions written down, but I pretty much didn't want to look at them. I didn't want to do an interview. I just wanted to see where it went, and I couldn't have been happier with how it turned out. And, Bjorn was so easy to talk to, and that was, something that I feel like we've been really lucking out with lately is, like, everyone we've been getting has been, like, wanting to talk, has good stories, has good, it's so easy, and it's so easy to do and talk to these people when that happens. And I hope for the sake of the people who listen to these, I know they're not listening to me talk, but I hope as a result they're like, man, that was really cool. I felt like I was just, listening to 2 people in a room just sharing drinks, which indirectly we kind of were.
Yeah, no, it was a good chat for sure. It was one of the easier ones to listen to just because it just flowed really well. And didn't sound like you were reading a list of questions off of a piece of paper, which I know you were. But no, I thought that was a great chat, and like I said, I'd be really excited if we do it again to be in on that.
Yeah, I'll kind of throw the positive vibes out there or whatever. For all intents and purposes, it seemed like Bjorn had a good time doing the conversation. It actually said that I have been, getting some emails about the new Soilwork record, and if he wouldn't mind coming back on when that's more closer to coming out and doing another chat to talk about the Soilwork album. And actually, I feel like it was kind of cool the way we talked about Soilwork, the new Soilwork record, in conjunction to the Night Flight Orchestra, because now I feel like it will give me a little bit of a different perspective when I go and listen to this new record whenever we get to listen to it and get to talk to Bjorn, because now we've heard about this other thing that he was doing where when he was like, okay, that's done, now I'm ready to write a Soilwork record. So I feel like that was a really cool thing that maybe fans who don't know much about Night Flight Orchestra, maybe if they're listening to this, they'll be pleasantly surprised to find out how involved doing this affected the Soilwork project.
Yeah, I agree. And I also think that what it provided for me was a little bit of context for Night Flight, like where it was coming from and, what they were aiming for. Because now whenever I go in and I listen, I can look for those elements.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I'm very much looking forward to both these represses, actually, for Internal Affairs and Skyline Whispers. The vinyl looks really cool for these. The way they're able to match up the artwork, the album cover artwork, to the vinyl color. They reworked the album artwork, obviously, for those records, but, I mean, Nuclear Blast is doing a great job with this packaging, with what they're doing with it. And
yeah.
I'm really excited to hopefully see some YouTube footage from the tour they're getting ready to embark on. I mean, by all accounts, it looks like, I would say this, and I haven't seen much live footage of them, like, on an actual solo run, but I feel like if you don't have fun at a Night Flight Orchestra show, it's probably because you're an asshole and you went into it with the wrong expectations. Because I feel like it'd be very hard to listen to this music in a live setting with Speed, with Bjorn wearing the beret, and not have a good time.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, I mean, listening to it on your computer, you might be like, I don't know if I'm into this, but like when you're there and the atmosphere kicks in and it's just basically a big party.
Yeah.
Like that's so much fun.
Oh yeah, definitely. And speaking of partying, we're going to keep this party kind of brief, since the conversation ran a little long. We're going to go... And if you would like to keep up with the party and follow the Night Flight Orchestra, you can find them on basically Facebook and Instagram at the Night Flight Orchestra. Simple enough. And interestingly enough, they don't have a Twitter account, but oddly enough, Bjorn doesn't have other social media, but he has Twitter. So I guess if you would like to follow Bjorn on Twitter, it is at Speed Strid, SpeedStrid, for those that don't know that. And speaking of following people, Dan, where can people follow you at?
You can follow me on Twitter at Discuss Metal Dan. You can follow me on Facebook under Daniel Terry, or the Discography Discussion page on Facebook. And you can find out more about that podcast at discussmetal.com.
And if you would like to keep up with all things the podcast, you can find us on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube at Jonsuntitledpodcast. Tweet at us at Jonsuntitledpod, and email us at jonsuntitledpod@gmail.com. And if you would like to follow our Patreon, you can find us at patreon.com/JonsuntitledPodcast. Keep up with our partners at Moshpit Nation at moshpitnation.com. Facebook is Moshpit Nation West, capital M-I. Twitter and Instagram are simply Moshpit Nation. And if you would like to follow our show sponsors at The Bean Bastard, you can find them at thebeanbastard.com. Facebook and Instagram are simply The Bean Bastard. And as you heard Bjorn say, he wanted us to play it out to the title track from their latest record, Sometimes the World Ain't Enough. So we are going to leave you with that, and we will talk to you next time.